Дорогие друзья, для того, чтобы...
Dear friend, to introduce all of you into the discourse of today's discussion, maybe it would be better to demonstrate a presentation for you instead of my pre-word. And it all will concern us next year already. Please start with the video what is marking and who needs traceability of goods. What is marking? It's easy, you would say. It's very old. It appeared many years ago, but not everything not as easy. But let's start from the beginning. It's hard to indicate the concrete date when marking appeared. Already in 16th century, Sviazhsk under Ivan Grozny, Ivan the Terrible was built. Then it was marked from top to bottom, then disassembled and assembled or according to the marking in another location. The marking was developing in two directions. Mandatory for consumer to make them possible to understand what they are buying, and non-mandatory for sellers for warehousing technologies. New technologies came up in the middle of previous century. Barcode, data metrics, and radio strains were invented. Now practically all goods have their markets, but is this marking be used for protection from fraud and from counterfeit products? No, each marking can be forged, and now we have the modern history. The new third development of the area is possible due to digital technologies, and in future it will replace the previous two. The first implementation of it is the experiment in Russia with marking for products to legalize the market and to control counterfeit products. And the main result of the experiment are big data, because owing to big data it has become possible to see the real picture in the market. We accepted the virtual warehouse of all goods, making it possible to trace all the goods. It's like with the modern taxi service. You can see where it is moving. And why is that, you would ask? Control over business, maybe, but that's not that. Let's look how it works in medicine. Let's imagine that in some region there is an epidemic. And by having a virtual warehouse in an online mode, we can quickly move medicine from adjacent regions. You can find a medicine, a pharmacy, if you have a low quality of medicine, and you can check the whole batch across the whole country. To simple logistics, we add the opportunity to provide medical help and prophylactics of diseases. And controller is the buyer itself. The data which are collected by selling marked goods have a lot of useful information. So the pilot projects on marking have become successful, and they opened new digital effects. Our short story about marking is coming to an end, but its digital life is just starting. What kind of new knowledge are there in these figures? Are we prepared for that, and whether they will be useful for all of us, for the state, for business, and for citizens? Although marking, it's just simple. Dear friend, let's applaud to this wonderful video. It sets the pace for today's discussion. The topic, which is in the recent time quite acute and pressing, because business and state have created an attitude just recently to it. I remember how representatives of small and medium enterprises especially were perceiving very complicated the Law 54, the migration to the new format of cash registered. And I kept repeating to my friends and colleagues that the new world is the digital economy, which is being discussed not only by media and writers, scientists, but also by the management of our country. And inevitably, this will come to our life. And from the fact how good we are going to realize this process and how proactively we will manage to organize the process, we will get either more or less effect, quicker or later. Today, we are starting the new life with goods traceability, with pilots, and to my joy, these pilots, and my joy is conditioned by the fact that except for Деловая Россия management, I was lucky to become the founder of our farm group of companies, and my joy is conditioned by the fact that medicine, along with fur goods, have become one of two pilots based on which we will see the opportunities and advantages of this new system. On my opinion, they are obvious, but I'm not going to impose my point of view to you. And I propose to listen to different opinions, and nevertheless, it's quite obvious that for consumers, the threat of counterfeited in such areas as medicine, medical goods, is the real threat for their lives. We are on the very edge of risks here, and I believe that the initiatives which are being commissioned are of key importance. The majority of entities in the pharmaceutical market understand the need for providing safety and security. The composition of our panel is confirming this fact. We have a lot of colleagues here, and nevertheless, before we bring the dialogue to the market area, I'd like to invite first the representative of our today's host, the host of the Moscow Financial Forum, first deputy of the financial minister, Tatiana Nesterenko, and ask her the following question. What's the role of the state in creating this system? What will state, business, and citizens get from this instrument? And the main thing, do you plan to create the full-fledged system with its legislation, or are we going to make only spotted steps in the area of marking and traceability? Good afternoon, dear participants of the second Moscow Financial Forum. First of all, I'd like to express my gratitude for your interest to our discussion. I'd like to thank you for your quick and vivid response, and I hope that many questions which we are going to discuss today will be beneficial, first of all, for the state, for the participant of the process which is involved in the regulation. We really saw that in this intro, the notion of marking can be spread out to many things, and it's been using quite long ago. Different items, different things, goods were marked from the ancient times. And for the first time, the term marking has been used as a control for the legal turnover of goods. And it is very easy, it is very important for us to check and to review the control process and to ask a question, why do we need this control over the goods turnover? And the goals are different, of course, for different players of this process. For the consumer, as it was said, the goal is to buy a high-quality product. We're all consumers here, all customers. For the producer and for the seller is to have guarantees of a fair competition. And maybe the participants of the pharmaceutical market and those who are engaged in this process, and we speak about the expansion, the goods groups, and the most important question is competitive advantages and creating of competitive advantages in turnover. And also it's important for the state. What are the interests of the state? Except for the timely payment of taxes. We receive a huge amount of information from processed big data, from and the marking and traceability system as we plan would significantly change the governmental functions on control and supervision. Today in Russia and in the Eurasian Union, the regulatory basis is developed. Ministry of Finance is an active player in this process. However strange it would be, but Ministry of Finance is the body who provides regulatory activities in this area. A number of legislative initiatives are prepared. There are temporary norms, temporary standards, but these standards, before the marking law, commissioning, the draft of which is now under the active discussion, and a lot of specialists take part in this process, a lot of entities of this market. This law describes all necessary tools which accompany the marking process. There are a few of them. First, it's marking itself. Marking is made while importing and the production of goods. And by the way, this is the main novelty of using the market in the form we are considering it as an element of controlling the turnover. The marking is made for each unit, not a batch, but the unit. But each item has its own unique number, unique ID. The second thing is the unique ID number, which is attached at commissioning. And the second thing is bringing out of commission, out of turnover. All these transactions, entering, migration to transfer to the wholesaler, and then along the chain, including retail, all these transactions on goods movement are basically fixed in the information system, which is located in the cloud and which is available to all the participants, including goods consumer and state controllers. Third thing, the information about goods movement should be combined with the accompanying documents, associated documents, because for us it's important to know what's the price and who are the participants on the chain and who is in this whole chain is the owner of different conversion steps. These are tax and customs declarations, the receipt and the VAT invoice. For the business, in principle, we believe that the ID code of the goods can be used by business for simple accounting, for warehousing accounting, and for any other internal bookkeeping accounting, which is also very important. A very important and quite obvious, but nevertheless complicated thing, which is included in this law, and without this tool we won't be able to move on, is creating of single reference books, which should be used by all participants. There are two documents: catalog of goods marked. There should be all full description, denomination, certification information. This reference book should indicate specifically on the goods identified. And the very interesting and the very important thing is the register of the player, the retail or wholesale addresses to which where these activities is carried out, and the documents confirming the right for these activities. They should be all included in this chain of goods turnover. Also important and quite complicated discussions will be spread out about the financial model of marking. we believe that marking is important for the goods, for the consumers, but also for the business. The financial model should be built on the public-private partnership. What the state should do? The state should set norms and regulations. We understand that only at the governmental level rules can be created, and maintaining of registers of goods, which I mentioned, and the participants of the process. What do we plan to commission the business with? Basically the marking at the moment of manufacturing or importing to the territory of Russian Federation. We will also consider the opportunity for the business to take the operators' functions for the systems in which the information is to be reflected about all transactions about the goods. Now, what are the results? Just in a few seconds. I think they are quite obvious. First, practical elimination in the controlled areas of gray schedules or gray schemes, because the turnover is becoming so transparent that it is becoming not only complicated but even impossible to work illegally. For example, someone would say, if during the night different goods will be produced. Okay, if they produce during the night shift the other goods, if these products can be registered in the system due to ID, these products cannot be passed over to the wholesaler, because the wholesaler will require this information. Maybe there will be some illegal trade, of course, but it would be a really criminal case, and we shouldn't evaluate this topic right now. We have different controlling bodies and law enforcement agencies for this. On the other hand, we expect a reduction of business conduct risks, because only registered participants with all permitted documents will be there. If you're a registered person, if you are legally open, you are in this system. Practically, you don't have any risks that someone would come to you and make additional checks while you're doing this. So we see the reduction of controlling burden, and the legal business which has access to this information will, in principle, as we expect, have less additional checks and inspections. We also see additional opportunity to use this information within the digital economy which we are living in, that in total, together with the electronic VAT invoices, check registers, and all traceability elements and marking elements, we will arrive at the fact when the taxation authority will form the amount of tax obligations for the taxpayers due to his or her activities. Our task is to make the state calculate the tax, and the taxpayer will either challenge it or agree to this and pay taxes in a fair mode. And a structured data array, which we will discuss today too, including the data about the medicine, which as an experiment we will see in the most case. The only one advantage that I wanted to mention for the state is the cost reduction, especially for medicine. I don't know whether our experts will touch upon this topic, but it's not a secret that the counterfeit amount is in the market not very high. But what is of concern for us? We are concerned about the repeated entering of goods to the market. When the medicine is given to the hospital and is not given to the patient, but is brought back to the market. 90% is paid in the hospital is paid by state. It leads either to higher costs or inefficient treatment. So given the system of marking, the bringing out of the market is the moment of passing over the medicine to the hospital. But it couldn't be brought back from the hospital to the market, only in some criminal illegal cases. I think that these issues related to the business interests, issues of financial model, I hope they will be the matter of today's discussion. When we are considering a draft law, we receive a lot of feedback. What business is concerned of? The business is concerned not about the marking system itself. It is naturally usable in all the countries and means migration of the economy towards digital. The uncertainty is of concern. What will be also of concern? What will be marked after the medicine? Shall our business be prepared for this? Shall we buy equipment and so on and so forth? We proceed from the fact in the government that we should expand these lists of goods very cautious, only in the segment, only in the area. If these issues are of concern from the excise or taxation point of view, or if we have information that there are a lot of false products and counterfeit products in the market, these goods will be taken under our control. Everything else, so far, we don't have enough resources to take everything under control.
Thank you, Tatiana. Let me make a short comment on behalf of business. I can tell you that 2 or 3 years ago, we understood that with regards to expensive goods, the consumers received the goods from unknown sources. It wasn't we that sold those goods to the consumers. Every package that our consumers receive from the unknown sources basically mean a lot of threats for us. And it's not only about losses. Even if it's just one package, it can lead to the discreditation of the position, to shutdown of the business, and other negative effects. And this happens every now and then. The secondary movement, the secondary use of goods, again, mean not just the losses. It also means that certain patients have not received medicine, and it means an irreparable harm to that patient. And then my third point, which is no less important, the current system of goods labeling is not effective for business, because the manufacturer can get involved into this process with very small capital investments. So it's a very comfortable system. And as a result, the entrepreneurs receive so to say, protection from those colleagues that, work based on illegal principles. So as a fair business, we do say that, the taxes are very high. We would love to relieve this tax burden. But it's impossible unless everybody pays taxes, because, we are losing this competition fight, and especially that people that do not stick to legal practices use it to their advantage. So Federal Tax Service is one of pilot agencies, but many colleagues have not yet been affected by this pilot project. Perhaps we should speak about fiscal part that Tatiana mentioned. And this is what I wanted to talk about. I wanted Andrei Baturkin, the Deputy of Federal Tax Service, to describe the situation, how this product labeling is going to change our reality, our everyday practices, and what are the priorities for labeling, do you see? Thank you, Alexei. Good afternoon, colleagues. I want to get rid of this intrigue, why and explain why tech service became this operator of this process related to goods labeling. So, product labeling is not one of our major functions as a federal tax service. We keep the register of small and medium enterprises. We also provide other registers. So there are two explanations to that. First of all, tax service is quite advanced in IT. And I'd love to thank the Ministry of Finance that has been supporting us regularly during the recent years. Without their support, we wouldn't have been able to implement lots of projects. And so being an operator of product labeling and other systems, it's true that our service accumulates a lot of data about taxpayers, and this is a very important component for building the system. I mean the digital product labeling system. But despite that we have made such a great progress in information technologies, when we started the project on marking fur goods, we faced quite a few problems that you can see here listed on the slide. And it's true not only about fur markets and medicines, and I guess we'll face the similar problems when we start these initiative on other markets. So that's why I agree with Tatiana. There's a big law on labeling goods prepared by the ministry, and there's a very wide scope of things included in it. This will help us to introduce this mechanism on many markets, and that's why it's good for understanding how the system works, what it consists of, and what expectations we should have. So another problem that we encountered at the very beginning is something that you would probably experience as well. It's about the evaluation of the market, because the market is approaching the era of labeling, and it means the evaluation and assessment of the current market environment. For example, we had to identify the configuration of the system, how many operations it had to process, and the capacity of storage, so that we could store all the information that we were going to accumulate on our servers. So we use different sources of data, including Rosstat. We also used other agencies' data. We actually received quite contradictory data. So just in case, we focused on the most high indicators to make sure we didn't have any surprises, but we still had surprises. And it happened just a year later, because nobody really knew much about this market. It looked completely different, and the turnover of the market, the participants were very different from the expectations that we had before beginning this project. And I can share my own point of view. The first results of fur goods labeling was all about receiving actual information about the market, how it looked like. And we understood that all the statistic data obtained from different agencies were uncomparable to the accuracy that could be achieved after we introduced the labeling system. So on this slide, I just wanted to give you a quotation given by Vladimir Lenin, the leader of the world proletariat. It's not that I respect him so much, or it's not to celebrate the 100th year anniversary of the Russian Revolution, but anyway, and we are not building a communist society anymore, just to make sure you don't think that I'm a communist. But anyway, for any country, whenever the decisions are made by the government, the basic elements for that should be control and accounting. So the labeling helped us to create a virtual warehouse where we can see different things located on every shelf and the movement of every product. And this is extremely important for the state, especially if we speak about socially sensitive areas, for example, drugs and other things. Of course, it doesn't mean that the state is going to send fur coats from one region to another to make sure people get through the winter. You know, in America, in Houston, they had lots of issues because of flooding, so they tried to move some goods from one part to another. Well, we'll take this into account. But anyway, we thought that it was much more important to deal with other issues. And this is what Tatiana mentioned, what we saw in that video. If there are certain places of epidemic and they needed certain drugs, we had it would be very important for us to know where we can get those medicines and send them. It's also important to identify if there are any medicines that are faulty or beyond their expiration date. But getting back to the fiscal effect, of course, it's there, but it's not the most important one. So this labeling helped us to identify the behavior of different participants on the fur market, and it helped us to understand how they develop their relationships with the government with regards to optimization of customs duties and tax payments. Here you can see a screenshot from our fur goods labeling. For example, you have several participants here. We decided not to show the names of the companies, and I was very happy for these market players because they actually managed to reach a very high cost effectiveness, plus 618%. So whether they do it whether they do it fairly, that's the main question, because the taxes that they paid were not quite appropriate. So this made us think about the legislation, and we sent our proposal to the Ministry of Finance so that these market players could not use the schemes. And we collected a lot of materials and handed over them to the law enforcement authorities. Anyway, it gives us only a fragmentary picture of about some market players, but it helped us to develop a risk management system, and we used not only our own system, but also other systems that are called NDS2 and KKT. So we're trying to merge different resources so that we could have a good profile of an enterprise activities, so that we could have a full picture about their work, not just some fragmentary picture. getting back to the key purposes or the key objectives for labeling. The main idea is to prevent counterfeit products and to stop unfair competition and to make sure our citizens do not have any health risks when they buy counterfeit products. So the data that is being accumulated for labeling carry a lot more information than we thought at the beginning. IT specialists have this term, the lakes of data, when a lot of information is being accumulated and it is stored in some data bank and is not really used. And this is what we have now, because we accumulate a lot of information with regards to labeling, but we use only a small share of this huge volume of data. So what we need to do now is to make sure that all this accumulated information works and functions to the utmost and used to make sure we serve our citizens' interests. For example, nowadays, when some company is trying to introduce their products on the market, they want to understand how it's going to be positioned, how successful it's going to be, and so they order marketing research based on surveys, assumptions, some reviews, and this data that we receive as part of labeling system is much more accurate, and it helps you to evaluate how successful your product is going to be on the market. And we are all consumers here. And having a smartphone enables us to buy any goods, some medicine, where we can buy it, whether we can check the price and decide where we can buy it. There's only one but. These additional opportunities is not something for the state to do, because the state is responsible for supervision. So creating convenient, user-friendly services for citizens would be the goal for the business, because business organizations understand much better what the citizens need. And so the commercial operator could be useful here. And my last slide in the conclusion. I can say that we have discussed some visible effects, some basic effects from labeling that we can get. There's some hidden potential there that the label mechanism entails. We might not know about it yet, because in the last 2 years, we have just opened a door. We took a glimpse, but we haven't really entered the space, and we have to do a lot of work together. I mean, business organizations and the government. So we have to open the door much wider so that we could enter that space properly. Thank you, Andrei. I can't agree that we would be able to buy the drugs in those drugstores where they are cheaper, because we have also to improve the legislation and do many other things. Nevertheless, it's obvious that the system that you described will change the effectiveness of healthcare in particular. For example, if we merge the data related to drugs and medicine use and death or mortality rate and many other factors, will understand the situation much better and will have a deep understanding of what we can do. It's also related to the cost effectiveness. So what I wanted to say here, we are speaking about labeling as if it's something new for us. Sometimes we are even scared. For example, when we began to label fur coats, of course, it can cost 30,000 rubles or 50,000 rubles, but then sheep coat can be bought just for 400 rubles. It requires a fine-tuning the system. But speaking about our neighbors, I mean the members of Eurasian Union, they have had this labeling system for several years, and Armenia has this labeling system for coffee, cosmetic products, water. Belarus introduced labeling for shoes, mobile phones, beer, and both local products and imported goods. So this experience is critically important for us, especially that we live in the unified economic space.
торговли.
And I'd like to address my next question to the Minister, Mrs. Nikishina, the member of the Collegium on the Trade of European Union. How are we going to embed our pilot initiatives in the format, in the practice which is existent in the countries of our neighbors in EU? What are the overnational mechanisms of regulation? Well, you basically told about the information on our first slide, and indeed, in two countries, the system of labeling, which is released in two countries, which is different in type of labeling and in type of assortment, and the implemented solutions in Russian Federation, the new approaches to market, all that made us think about the fact how uniform or non-uniform these systems would be, and how these non-uniform systems would create problems in our single market if we will not think in due time about the common work on common principles, on uniform principles, which would be clear and available for the business and would make each of our 5 markets not unique, but a single market of the whole union. And as a matter of fact, we came to an idea to develop the parallel, to do the parallel job on developing a draft law for 5 countries, for marking for 5 countries. For example, for labeling, practice showed us that if business or regulators are not ready for marking, they don't want marking, so even by making them sign and ratify this agreement, the application or implementation of these laws won't be in place. It won't exist. Only Russia and Belarus for fur coats use the norms of this agreement. So we took the way of making this agreement motivating and not enforcing. In the ideal case, we would like to see that the construction of the market in the single market would look like in the left side of this slide. Each country has some uniform line of products, and by marking them through the uniform information system, information hub, provide information exchange and create the transparent traceability in the market, avoiding the need for Armenia, where the market for Armenia these marks are labeled by Armenian market in Russia, and for national market to stick different stickers. And this construction that we include in the legislation, in the draft legislation, is ideal, is perfect. But not the whole business is ready for this market. But not to create a situation when, without readiness to implement marking, labeling, some businesses would prevent from implementation of this system, creating parts of the market. For instance, country 1 and country 2, if they are willing to mark, they can do it in as pilots on the first stage of realization of our labeling agreement, and asking other countries by their example to join this system, and by motivating gradually, without enforcing, to ask to join their system. Again, by using mistakes, or maybe not mistakes, but using the analysis and lessons learned on the fur market, we came to understanding that in the principle, the labeling agreement has to be an umbrella agreement. It should describe principles of labeling, and it should be more flexible. It should place the decision-making on a more flexible label about labeling of either of goods. Because we understand that marking of medicine or a bottle of water implies different technological schemes and types of the label. So we are not possible to specialize and detail it all in one agreement. So we provide principles which, generally speaking, are three main principles. First, the label should be machine readable. We're not speaking about its specific form, a QR ID or barcode or whatever. It has to be just machine readable. Second point, it has to be mutually readable, which is also really important, because, for instance, in Armenia, machine-readable labels are marked, so-called Vera codes. This is a national standard of coding, which are not unified. No other countries could read it, and they are written in Armenian language, by the way. And there should be IT systems compatible to each other. It shouldn't be only one information system. In Kazakhstan should develop its own, but these systems have to be organized in a way that the information would be compatible and could be interchangeable. For example, our colleagues from Armenia say, we have a system, you should fine-tune your system for our system, but it has to be a double-way movement. These are the principles, but how they could be realized, this is a matter of a specific discussion of the specific goods. The next principle of the agreement is the bringing it all to the level of the Council of specific technological decisions on marking specifically of goods which will be discussed future. What is the Council? 5 vice premiers, one from each country, once a month a meeting, and in quite a flexible mode they can make decisions. Next principle, that national labeling systems should go and exist in parallel. We're not going to kill them, but we're going to motivate the joint movement towards a uniform system, an invitation for that. We only have an agreement that if the marking is entered on over national level, the national labeling system in this case is excluded, because in this case there shouldn't be double marking of a good. And maybe the last principle, very important for the business, because we have 5 businesses which are concerned very strongly, and we have 5 businesses who come from all the segments because they don't understand what will be the next goods for marking. And so we enter some principle of bonuses or perks for businesses. The colleagues were right to say that we gather huge amounts of information and we should think how to use them for business also. For example, in our agreement, we provide recipes and principles. For instance, if through marking we create a so-called electronic passport of goods, and the marking contains some information which are doubling some information on paper, maybe it would be useful and expedient to recommend to get rid of paper-based carriers. What kind of documents will that be should be decided in every specific case relevant to a specific goods. So we write it all as general principles. Basically, that's it so far. Many thanks. Indeed, the Russian business, for me, it's hard to speak for all 5 countries, but it's quite confident knowing that we have such strong protection in the Council, and Mr. Shuvalov on your behalf and the first Vice Prime Minister of the government, Mr. Shuvalov, and we see that interests of Russian producers and Russian consumers were also important, are protected due to unification and harmonization of all systems, and we will be protected much better. We had lots of cases when good norms, very rational and expedient, which we planned to implement in Russia, failed to be implemented because we were not sure that we will be able to correctly harmonize our system with the systems of our partners in a timely manner. And when we compare apples to potatoes and not apples to apples. And so in this regard, we sincerely hope that maybe not a fiscal, but the controlling function, verification function within the single economic environment will be protected on a proper level. For example, now we have a very interesting trend. Absolutely many high-tech production facilities are built in Kyrgyzstan on the border to China. Maybe there are some competencies or some potential there, we don't know, but we are really cautious about that. So interests of business and consumers to provide equal rules of play for everyone. And the more transparent is the systems, the more chances are there that it's going to be success. Of course, we will never be able to live only in the environment of trust, because among fair businessmen there could also be unfair businessmen. But to filter out the high-quality product, we have our controlling bodies for that. Before you pass the floor, I'd like to react, if you may. We not only create regulatory basis, we invite business for discussion of further stages which will follow the agreement on specific trade goods, specificities and peculiarities. We invite producers, consumers. First of all, the priority in the list are medicine, shoes and jewelry, and some other goods which were named by the business to include in this discussion. We invite the business, and without coming to the regulatory part, we are going to create optimal models and weigh out all pros and contras to remove all phobias of the business which can't understand properly what is on the mind of the controlling bodies. The audience is really lucky today, because today here in this room we have the thread and the needle. Your message is addressed to those who need it, those who are interested in labeling, those who understand that it will concern their business, and it is concerning their business. They are here today. And I think that your message is really helpful and the discussion will be continued in the really near future. Just before this session, I received information that Roszdravnadzor, one of the key regulatory bodies, tried to compete to the Federal Taxation Service for the position of the most IT advanced institution, and wants to show a very nice video. Because before you start, let's have a look, or maybe later. The video comes later. Okay. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. My name is Mikhail Murashko. I represent the Federal Service for surveillance in the area of healthcare. We are dealing in several markets: medicine equipment, cell products, and medical aid, of course. And I'm not going to ask you to raise hands, but to make you understand what is it all about, please imagine that you offered to buy a fur coat without marking, but cheaper. And now answer to yourself whether you buy it or not. And I will ask you the second question. You were offered to buy a medicine without label, cheaper, but which can be counterfeited. And in this way, Roszdravnadzor received around 150 million of time workers. You and everyone who says this, who have this button, we can use these employees, and no one will reduce these employees because they are not on staff. So you shouldn't be so fast. Tatiana Gennadievna will ask about this. We made this slide, which is called Sunturn. There are a few main issues, main items. In the recent times, the whole regulatory practice was updated. Clinical experiments, expertise of medical equipment. Twice a year we make updating, production and manufacturing GMP practices. Marking rules from 2016, requirements for sampling control, which were introduced in 2015 and working quite efficiently. Storage, including also pharmaceutical control requirements to pharmacies, bringing back to Russia and disposal. It is all updated. What we lacked for our work. For our work to see anything, we need informatization and the maturity state of the whole controlling system. And to make the controlling system work, we, together with the taxation service, we're not competing against them, of course. We go hand by hand. We practically forming the tracing system from producer to consumer. And this resource, this information resource, cloud technology, which we are creating based on this, contains information about each pack, production facility. Each production line is equipped either with printing devices which apply the individual ID on each pack, or the sticking of self-destructive marking containing the same information which is imprinted. We considered different forms, and we selected the 2D barcode, and we contacted to our colleagues from abroad, and they came to the same conclusion. So the process today of movement in Russian Federation and from our colleagues in the US, European Union, in Argentina, in the US, it goes the same way as we go. And for all the players in this process, for all producers, we don't create any destabilization environment or uncomfortable environment which made them adjust. And our domestic producers which enter foreign markets more actively, they have the opportunity to work painless in other markets too. Today, information from manufacturers tells us that our registration documents are accepted absolutely unconditionally by other countries, which speaks in favor of our system. If we speak about marking, what are the benefits for state? And Tatiana Gennadievna already mentioned that. This is first the economic effect. Basically, it can cover all the costs borne by the state. Second, protection of population. Last year, we took from the circulation around 1,000 falsified lines. Is it much or not? But it's less than 1%, but around 7 million packs. The effect can be estimated. And of course, these are issues related to control over morbidity, prevention, and of deficit of some medicines. And for the population is, of course, the opportunity to be sure on her own, on their example. We were almost always being asked, how can I check whether this is a genuine product or not? Using a mobile device, now you can check that this is a high-quality product and genuine product. Business takes the costs. They say, we will show you a video where one of the head of pharmaceutical companies will speak, and they say that it's on the first stage, there are costs, but the benefits for the business are compensating these costs. Alexey Evgenievich mentioned that we should move on, and the technologies are developing when he mentioned internet trade. Today, this document is developed, and it is in the plan of the State Duma to be discussed and to be introduced. And of course, without control, having the e-trade and without the opportunity for checking by the population, it won't be possible to be implemented. So if we give something, some ease somewhere, we should create also the controlling factors without allowing the illegal trade to appear, and each consumer, even at home, can make sure that this is a legal pack, it's licensed, and the pharmacy is also licensed. So today, we understand that labeling and traceability of medicine products is a right way of the controlling body, which would allow, in conjunction with online cash registers, to provide prevention of illegal deeds and sales above the set price. The amount of benefits from these initiatives could not be provided by any previous projects. And I personally received a number of preferences and benefits. I was just lucky to work in a wonderful team combined from the colleagues from production, from the Ministry of Health and Ministry of Trade and Industry. And I'm really surprised how every player in this project, in this team, is interested in all this endeavor. I received a huge experience, a huge knowledge from these people. Now, the video.
На экран.
The quality of medicine influence the quality of life and health of people. Even a small share of counterfeit products will have a negative impact. The president initiated the project Medicines, Rules and Safety. Every medicine will have a unique code that will help you to monitor the way from producer to the user. By today, the federal authorities, executive authorities, have made preparatory work. They developed, they have established a passport of priority project. The government has signed all the resolutions and developed the plan and project design documentation. The by 2019, this project will be covering most of the country and most of the areas. And it will have, every product will have the global good code classifier of the trade group and the identification. It will also be the expiry date will be indicated, as well as the date of production. The code will be protected from forging. Then all the data about the products will be transferred to the global system of serialization and to the state information system in the form of electronic document signed by the electronic signature. This will help to identify every package and improve the safety of the system. Beginning with 2019, only labeled medicine will be produced. This will help to prevent any counterfeit products come into Nova, and this means that all the participants will be involved in this project: distributors, drugstores, the authorities, etc. And even though it requires lots of costs, they will not be in vain. We see only benefits of a labeling system. First of all, producers will make the market transparent. They will understand where their medical products are stored, where they are used, etc. And it will help them to improve the production process. It will help them to understand how effective their costs are, for example, for advertisement and for promotion campaigns for the trade representatives. And thirdly, labeling will help producers to fight counterfeit products and get rid of counterfeit products on the market. The labeling system will help them to identify which package generated some problems. So thanks to this system, the producer can remove an inappropriate quality medical drugs. The government will have a good administration resource and tax control. Also, it will help to do prompt control of drugstores. These instruments, control instruments, will be provided to unlimited number of users thanks to the passport of the product. They can just download the application and scan the code. Thus, quality, safety would be available to every person of this country. I completely agree with Mikhail's opinion and Ivan Glushkov, who is one of the most respected representatives who is working for our industry. I'm sure that the introduction of labeling will have very many positive effects, both for producers and for consumers, especially nowadays when for example, there's a big series, but there could be one or two counterfeit packages because they were not recycled in the right way. And some people might use this, and they sell it as if it was a new bunch of products, and as a result, sometimes the whole batch, has to be revoked, has to be dismissed, and it would result in millions of rubles losses. So, for example, one series has been cancelled, but there's no new series that has been produced, and patients suffer because they can't have right medication. At the same time, I'd love to point out that many companies made efforts to use labeling before this pilot project started, before this official commission for pharmaceutical industry. All different companies try to label their goods in this or that way just to make sure their products are not stolen in their network. It was not easy because according to the law 61, it was very difficult to introduce changes in the package without re-registering that package, without making changes to the registration system. So that's why all the procedures related to labeling have to be effective, streamlined, and fast. Once we understand what kind of products distributors have, where they are located, it would help us to save time for supervision control. For example, now we are working together with Mr. Abizov, and we are carrying out the reform as a priority project, and we have to employ technological possibilities and digitalization to reduce costs through the transparent system. Here I can see mostly the representatives of manufacturers and sales. I guess it would be appropriate to ask a question to the representative of the Ministry of Industry and Trade, Evgeny Ryzhov. He is responsible for this system. For example, do you have a list of products that are forged most often? You know, so many people ask the question about new groups of goods. What kind of products are going to be included in the next stage of the pilot project? So we are interested in government regulations and procedures, and how soon are the industries going to get to know about the decisions made by the ministry related to kinds of products, different categories of products. Maybe it's not that acute with pharmaceuticals. And you know, there are many technologies being introduced, compensation of leasing payments, where companies cannot obtain the labeling equipment and provide all the necessary facilities for that. Well, thank you, Alexei. I'd love to praise you on this discussion, very well represented the companies and the government here. So we had a meeting on the 24th of August, chaired by Vladimir Putin, and we reviewed the illegal turnover. And actually, the figures that were mentioned were 33% of illegal product turnover, and it hasn't really been reduced. So we are going to continue this work to reduce the illegal product turnover. So following the instruction of Igor Ivanovich, we have identified 10 items shoes, blouses, coats, tires, eau de toilette, perfumes. And next year we're going to start our pilot project on shoes. I've got several figures here. We have assessed the project on fur coats, and it was 60 billion rubles, and as to shoes, it's going to be 65 billion rubles, only 16% of Russian manufacturers. So we are very cautious about our producers. We shouldn't create another burden for them. So we are working together with the company representatives just to make sure we minimize all the losses as a result of labeling. 75% of shoes imported are the shoes from China. Even though we have a free trading zone with Vietnam, we receive only about 6% from Vietnam, and we are going to sort out the mess with regard to imported shoes. I hope that it won't be very complicated for our producers and manufacturers, because, you know, they always say, oh, you do one thing, then another thing, you introduce different duties that we have to pay, environmental duty and other kind of things. But we're going to start this pilot project on shoes next year anyway. Well, you have to understand the producers, and you should respect manufacturers. For example, Snow Queen store sells high-quality goods, high-quality fur coats, but also we have, you know, different kind of categories like rubber shoes or working clothes, and some certain employees have to have them at their factories. For example, we have rubber shoes, plastic shoes, and we have to have them in place. So it's very difficult for us to fight against these regulations and rules. Well, you know, these norms have been set by the Ministry of Labor, but we have to fight and do something about it. You mentioned sheep used for special working clothes, but it's not true. You know, special uniform is one of the leaders, and we compete not only on internal market, and we have very good potential for exporting our uniforms. We have lots of different industries, oil and gas and railway services. So whenever the management teams think about their workers, they all want them to dress properly. So, you know, we don't have any supplies from China. Most of this uniform is produced here in the Russian Federation. And maybe we should start clothes labeling or fabric labeling, because, you know, that we can hold a competition and see all the pieces, because we know what kind of fabric it is, what it consists of. But anyway, there are some niches with low turnover, with low costs. We shouldn't slide back and reduce the requirements. We should probably compensate the costs or support these enterprises in some way, so that they could have a higher standard of goods and services. And my question is for Mr. Ugarov. What benefits do you see, speaking about labeling for trade and not so much for the manufacturing? And what risks do you envisage? What do you think about the government decisions? How soon can we broaden the list of goods and products based on your experience of fair products labeling? Well, good afternoon, dear colleagues. I would like to congratulate you on Financiers' Day if you are working in finances. I'm happy to have this conversation. Actually, I'd love to ask the support team not to start my slides, because I'd love to So, I don't really want to elaborate on the benefits from labeling system, because a lot has been said about it. All the speakers mentioned enough about this. And now I'd love to mention 3 risks. The risks of this project failure, and then I'll outline certain business proposals and the vision that we have for this for the development of this project, based on the proposals that we introduced last year. This concerns private-public partnership.
About risks, there is a general illusion that a tracing system can directly result in market legalization. With much respect, Andrei Nikolaevich, I perceive things and see things that you're doing, and many thanks for that. And by the way, last year we saw a huge support and help in the FUR pilot. And thank you very much, Dmitry Yuryevich, also for the support in this project. And the figures that you've shown about the market volumes, they show for today that the labeling system and traceability system itself is nothing without quite efficient mechanisms which would allow us the controlling and supervising activity. You estimated the fur market in the amount of 60 billion rubles, and it was historically so. I represent here also the Snow Queen board and also the Association of Retail Traders. I represent all these companies, all these enterprises and institutions. The whole market, 120 million, is minimum, and we still evaluate it at 200 million rubles. And we can be surprised by the fact that more than 2,600,000 was introduced and 600 was sold during the season. You can realistically understand that if the turnover 20% a year, 20% a year turnover for any business is not possible. Unfortunately, 600 turnover units is the signal that the information about sales in the KISS system and KISS number was introduced, but the sales information was entered only by a few companies who historically signed a charter on fair business or fair operations. And because people have formally more than 2 million items left, which are in their stock. So this year, at least 2 million items should be entered the system just to cover the balances which are in the system. And physically, these balances are not in stock. So the basic risk in this regard is, first of all, the basic risk for the business, which is in the following: without improvement of the legislative basis and without active, I would say proactive position on organization of changes to federal laws and in principle on controlling and activities, we won't be able, or it would be really hard to successfully implement this project. I'd like to move to specific proposals in my presentation. These are proposals from the business, which are being discussed quite closely with all stakeholders. I'd like to focus your attention on one item number one, unfortunately not very well seen from this place. The scheme that you've shown is basically is existent in the fair market. There is a unique situation there. These classical schemes which were used in the market to increase the prime cost, and some banks or banking structures proposed such sort of services. As soon as the pilot of the market was introduced in the market, these structures refused from offering such services because there were traces left in the marking system, the labeling system. The only fundamentally used scheme is to use gaps, loopholes in the legislation for the embedded income tax. And we made a lot of letters to the Ministry of Finance from both of our organizations. From the end, we hope that we come to some common point, common understanding. How can we make that in the first system you would see the turnover of around 200 million rubles. As for the shoes, so just for reference, we should understand that in the market, the turnover of which is estimated at 600-700 million rubles. For the current moment, there are almost 20 chains with more than 20 stores, and out of these 20 chains, only 2 work in the format of a single legal entity. All other chains are splitted in their businesses and using the single tax mode. 90% of the market don't pay the value-added tax. As for the labels, the business clearly understands, and we are supporting absolutely the proposals. And basically speaking, we support the proposals of different institutions. The system of tracking is very important, and the basic variant is a uniform digital code. Hypothetically, for some products, protected unique sign can be used, issued by some issuer, by Gosnak, for instance, and theoretically are feed, but fairly speaking, I don't think we should be too in a hurry here to move too fast here, because this thing in all electronic devices, our feeds will emerge just in course of developing of the Internet of Things. So we shouldn't be run ahead of the train here. Now the most important thing that I tried to reflect here. Maybe the picture is not as easy as it might seem. The general idea is in the following, in the first two things. First, we proceed from the paradigm that the direct investment from the state for creation of data centers, infrastructure, or for creation of some processing centers, direct investments from the part of the state, generally speaking, are not needed. And so we need to use the PPP mechanism. But looking closely at this system, and Tatiana Gennadievna stressed that expectations of the state from what we call big data, what is shown in the very center in a blue circle, they are there and these expectations are clear, but if you look at the whole chart, there is the functional asymmetry. The requirements, the expectations of the state or potential opportunities of the state in terms of processing of metadata, they are different from those potential opportunities which can business or consumer receive. What is this difference? From the point of view of the state, first of all, it's necessary to get first information which allows to execute basic functions to different institutions. We need to have some hypotheses which on one hand would allow to build up a proper legislative activities and legislative initiatives, and second, we need hypotheses which would allow to properly screen out and select those global infrastructure projects created on the basis of public-private partnership, but nevertheless to select them properly and to understand which one could give better effect and provide necessary documents and provide opportunities to have support from the state. And the only variance of this support I can see only in the form of the funding guarantees and not more, not direct spending of state money. At the same time, looking at the business first of all wants to receive so-called interesting information, which is more about marketing. This information is required by a big number or big amount of market players, and B, this information is different. The state it's being used differently depending to which type of business it belongs. The most important I wanted to stress is the availability of the structural asymmetry, structural skew, which requires, from our point of view, to split competencies, and basically which is depicted in the center, data, and several blue blocks around it with A letters. This is the global system of labeling, but we see it still consisting of two layers, because the state should directly work with the first tier of the system, where the data should be collected and the basic competence of the consortium which will realize, except for infrastructure. The main competence here are data processing, data protection, the working mechanisms with big data, and development of a specific competence which is possible to create in Russia, because we have strong mathematicians, when using automatic algorithms of working with big data, it is possible to find out and understand correlations between different aspects of this data, either in industrial or regional aspect. For the market as is, and under the market I mean companies which are going to be connected to the labeling system. The connection will be limited on the second tier level, obviously, because the main competence of this second tier globally is in the fact to create very friendly, very right and correct and self-learning interface of interaction with a huge amount of players. And this interface works like skin. It works in one direction, transmitting things and giving an opportunity to place data into a big hub, into a big storage, and on the other side, from the other direction, all the created directly at the level of a separate market sector information or some marketing information received based on this big data. The second tier is and gives an opportunity to make easier and faster and to promote it easier and faster for the bigger amount of market players. The function of the second layer is competence in creating an interface, the usability of this interface, using the interaction with all industrial associations, creation, the support service 24/7, and so on and so forth. In all other things, the future of the whole system, and in this case, we can formulate it as a potential happy future which can expect all of us. This is an incredible opportunity because there is an opportunity to create additional services, not only relating digital workflow, independent whether it's B2B or B2G or B2C, and additional services because the system can see balances and services can be built up which are based on balance optimization first. And second, this system is, as a matter of fact, a bag for every marketplace, for every integrator, because in the end, the marketplace is concentrated on how to work as comfortable as possible with clients and to produce information to them using all technical opportunities of internet marketing, which is available. And anyway, it has to be a backup which allows to marketplace, distributors, sellers, in the reality very quickly and very clearly, according to the certain standard, to provide information about their information with pictures and descriptions, as it was stressed by the state bodies. And then further on, not to enter into so-called personal relations with some front, either Alibaba or Yandex Market or whatever, or to do it through the existing coalition. Any option when initially the connection to the integrators happens for a big amount of enterprises who represent 80–90% of the industry, in general, this approach is more efficient in terms of potential monetization due to a simple reason, because immediately we get the traffic for the whole category. Well, Alexei, I'm going to finish, and just briefly, there is a functional asymmetry. There is understanding that there are a lot of job to do. The business in form of associations is ready and open for this job, and federal bodies can hear us in general, and we're grateful for that. And apart from Ministry of Finance, Tax Service, and Ministry of Industry and Trade and Commerce, who heard us once when we approached them with a smaller market of fur goods. But the pilot was accomplished. Many thanks to all of you, and we are open for further work and for further cooperation. Thank you. Thank you, Vugar. I am under impression of this conceptual presentation, and if further on I'm going to moderate the panel and stumble, the person is not a machine and developing not so quickly as a chip. So about chips, about RFIDs, I can tell you that for our market, which is 5 times bigger than fur markets, it's more than 1 trillion, it's quite obvious that RFIDs should be used where we need to geographically identify the goods. These are drugs and psychotropic substances where we should localize their threat for other people. There are a lot of scary stories when people at refinery plants trying to boil some self-made substances, and the whole Kapotnia is shuddering of fear. Okay, but it's very important there where medicine bear risks, not only for those who can abuse them, but only for the surrounding people. The RFID could be a solution. Yes, it's expensive and not profitable, but once again, working with these categories of medicines, it's not about the profit. It's about it's the function of the state, basically, to provide safety for people. And the second quite domestic comment, if there are millions of furs in some warehouses, and no, there are lots of medicines in the warehouses, the incoming VAT is there, but not in outbound VAT. And now we can see it in electronic form. Maybe we will find some lacking, not only fur coats, but also taxes, and we'll be able to fund our healthcare better. I will have a question to Tatiana Gennadievna. I'd like to announce it in the beginning. In the near hall, Andrei Makarov is moderating the taxation section, and we discussed many times with them why is the situation in the healthcare. It's like in a swamp. However, whatever money you invest, it will be absorbed without no use. But and unfortunately, although I'm representing a different front, sometimes I understand that he speaks about reasonable things, that the more information technologies we add, the more transparency we add to the system, and the definition what needs to be consumed and how should it be consumed, and the efficiency of goods movements, management, the higher will be the quality of requests in from the healthcare system for the budgeting findings. So I hope we will find all our fair codes and make our healthcare more efficient and in line with the high quality of a big power. And we will not only in the club of warrantor of peace globally, but we also be the club of 80 plus, where the life expectancy is longer than 80 years, for which we all have right, I guess. Okay, coming back to the fact that we have lots of data, and without organizing them, without creating catalogs and registers mentioned by Tatiana Gennadievna, this job couldn't be done. And in this regard, I'd like to ask the question to Mr. Laevsky. I know that you started to work with retailers in the direction of the single catalog of goods. I'd like to understand where we are, what's our position. Please share your experience.
Thank you, dear colleagues. Thank you for this opportunity to talk here and take part in this discussion. It's true that together with our retail market participants, we work on the consumer goods project, and consumer goods include both food products and non-food products. And we started with the catalog, master data catalog. So we are developing this catalog at the moment. We have selected the financial model of a goods description. So now the laboratory is going to publish a detailed master description for 50,000 items of goods, and that's the way we do, because the data that we receive from the market is not quite true, and we have to make sure all the data is 100% accurate. Now, do we have any analytics? So you have described 50,000 items. How many are there? Between 500,000 to 600,000 in retail. This work, in fact, started with a unique opportunity, because we have Federal Law 54 that gives an opportunity to see all the sales data. Of course, this law has to be modified and adjusted so that all the items had the unique description with ID code, and if we work with this model, master data plus receipt data, we would eventually get a detailed picture of goods movement, and that's what Tatiana mentioned at the very beginning. So then we'll be able to launch this project, and I guess at the beginning of the next year we'll already carry out a pilot project, and we'll be happy to introduce it and represent it to a broad audience. We work together with Federal Tax Service. We do understand how important it is to have private and public partnerships, so we're very happy to take part in this process. Thank you very much. As you noticed, probably we have a microphone here in the room, and my next question is going to be about a different aspect. When we speak about the introduction of label and system, we understand that it requires lots of investments, big hard work, lots of modifications have to be made. We have to change the current business practices, and our company that takes part in this pilot project and introduces IPAC system, we spent a lot of time to modernize and update the equipment and electronic system for the enterprise. Whenever we undergo such dramatic changes, it has to bring us new opportunities, because we want to make the situation better. So the question is whether the business can become the operator of IT system and not just benefit from this labeling system. Like Andrei mentioned, sometimes we divide fiscal work and operational work. So what would be the best model of working with data that the community is going to receive through the labeling system? So I'm interested in the private companies' involvement, and I'd love to ask Mikhail Dubin to comment on this. I represent the company that was created with support of USM, and one of the goals that our company had was participation in labeling projects. So I wanted to mention two technological aspects that are essential. I'm actually director of USM management, and I'm responsible for IT part. We earn hundreds of millions of rubles using databases. So we focus on technologies, both when we design different models and when we develop different proposals with regards to regulation. Whenever we speak about big data, we impose certain requirements to IT system. This IT system has to be uniform, has to be single for all different categories of the goods. Then it would be very useful for decision making. And we spoke about digital code and other codes. We stand for digital labeling, and maybe it would be good to enter this point in the digital economy program. And it's important to protect the ID code. The generator of random numbers is quite well protected, but hackers develop alongside with IT companies. So it's important to know how to work with cryptography, and it'll be important to replace the crypto geographic protection to make sure it's safer and secure. Another thing that we shouldn't forget when we introduce a labeling system, and I mean the consumer and business organization involvement, because business is really interested in this process. So we should think about different measures to stimulate their interest. And if the business supports this process, it would be possible to work with bigger groups of products. Once the business supports this initiative, we'll be able to make it much faster, because there are so many examples when we introduce systems and it takes us years. We'd love to make it as fast as possible. Another thing that we shouldn't forget is the consumer. We heard about people's control, and actually people's control will enable the system and make it work. Online cashier desk is a unique platform for track and trace. So Russia will be one of the pioneers here, just when we have the full traceability process, because not all colleagues that are members of Eurasian Union can be proud of that. And using this example of online cash desks, we can say that they are not as promptly introduced as we could. So ID code protection, uniform system for all the categories goods, and the business support. These are the main factors that are important for us. I share your view. Once we have the data, once we can apply the data, we'll be able to work with this data. And so the added value will not be just some monopoly on this data. It will be all about application of this data. So we'll be able to generate solutions that will help to make our business better and more competitive. I can say that the Russian companies should be able to take part in this process, and they should be proactive in this. It shouldn't be just, an intergovernmental cooperation between, the suppliers of foreign products that are labeled outside of Russia and cannot be traced. All this labeling system should be fully operational here in Russia. I haven't mentioned we explore the opportunities with regard to localization of products, and there's a very broad range of goods, and if we want to trace bigger groups of goods, we'll need that. And private partnership and the system operators would be really useful. Of course, different groups will have different interests, different needs. But anyway, if we stick to extremes, it's bad, because if only the government acts, it's bad. If only the private companies work, it's again not good, because we can't guarantee high quality products. So private and public partnership would be a good response to that. So just to sum up our discussion, I would like to say congratulations on the Financiers' Day, and to give a round of applause to those people that are involved in this process. And also this weekend we are going to have a city day, and we are having this we are having this financial forum here in Moscow. So we are doing a lot of work, and I think that it's going well. We do understand how important it is, even though it seems easygoing. We realize that it's not some excessive administrative burden. It will really improve our life. So thank you very much, and congratulations on the Financiers' Day.